Okay, so it's 7 o'clock. In the interest of time, I'll get started because we have quite a bit to cover this evening. So welcome everybody to our series of winter webinars, where the aim is really to help you get the most out of Proform and all the resources that we have. Hopefully Simon will join me later on this evening. As I mentioned earlier on, we're going to do a bit of a double act tonight and address any questions you may have, but also any perspective that Simon has as well. So tonight's webinar is how to build a robust horse racing system. It's a term that's used quite a bit, and hopefully tonight what we'll do is to give you a little bit more information on how you can create your own systems using Proform resources. So the information we'll cover really is related to the basics of what is a horse racing system. We'll look at some ideas and some pointers how you can create your own systems. We'll then look at why systems fail and talk about a simple process that we can use to create a system, and then figure out how we know that the system works. And then we'll look at some examples using the information within Proform. So we'll look at the daily stats, our race guides, and the Proform software, and then some helpful hints to close. So what is a horse racing system? Well, effectively, it's a structured approach to gambling in an attempt to produce a profit. Unlike traditional forms of gambling where we will actually go through the form book, or we may approach betting in terms of trading, a horse racing system, or this approach, really relies on a set of rules. And it's those rules that will actually govern our selection. And what's attractive about horse racing systems is, for those of you who don't really have time to spend a lot of time in the form book, you can create a system which effectively does all the work for you in theory, or shorten the whole process. And then, as a prelude to this sort of webinar, I mentioned that a subscriber of ours, and I'm sure many other subscribers as well, effectively use systems because it's a rule-based thing to put into a computer, and then via the Betfair API automatically place bets based on the system rules. Now, with any system or in any form of betting, you have to have a definable edge. You have to have something which indicates that you have an advantage. There's no point in betting if you don't have that advantage. And more importantly, specifically with system, it has to be definable as well. So to help you define that edge, typically you would use some sort of statistical analysis, or you would keep records, or you would crunch the numbers to really determine the sort of effectiveness of your system, how much edge you have, and then you proceed to make use of that system. And this is where Proform can help, in that we do have the system builder, which we'll go on to discuss in a moment. So where can we get some ideas for our systems? Well, one approach would be not to rate the abilities of the horses, but to evaluate the minds of punters and exploit a simple weakness in their thinking. So for those of you who, like myself, got into betting by reading Nick Morden's book, Betting for a Living, in there he has a chapter that talks about systems. And one example he does provide is the example with respect to the bias that punters have in respect to lady jockeys. For whatever reason, that they've taken the view that a lady jockey is not as strong as a male jockey, and it's up to the individual to make a conclusion on that. But what Nick Morland does indicate that under certain circumstances, an actual lady jockey is better than a male jockey. And this is where you can actually formulate a system. Well, why? Well, it's the punters who actually set the odds. It's the weight of their money that sets the odds. And if they think that something is underestimated in the market, then it gives you an advantage. So you could take advantage of that bias in your system. Another idea for a system is to find a type of horse or angle that most punters under or overestimate the market. So hopefully you can tell from my accent, I'm from the West Country. I actually live sort of maybe 5-10 minutes away from my local course of Bath. And the example there for a type of horse that runs well on that idiosyncratic track is a horse called Desperate Dan, where he won quite a bit. For whatever reason, elsewhere he'd run poorly, but at Bath he'd absolutely storm away at some double-figure odds. Another angle as well that I took advantage of, it's not sort of there now, is that Bath itself did have a bias towards front runners. And over 1 mile 2 furlongs and 1 mile 3 furlongs, you could have made quite a bit of money just by backing a horse that would run prominently. That talks about sort of a situation where we've underestimated. There's also the opposite, because if the market overestimates something and we have some information that suggests that that's incorrect, then that gives us an opportunity to use a system where we can lay or take an opposing view of the market. So system ideas can come from many sources. It's come from what you hear, what you see, from papers, pundits, the internet, different codes of racing, days of weeks, months. Another example, I was reading an article today which gave me an idea for a system which I ran through Proform, and it yields a 25% strike rate and a 24% return on investment to Betfair starting prices. And that was just reading an article and then running the numbers. So you can get plenty of ideas from multiple different sources. However, we have to be careful, because we can approach the whole act of defining a system in an incorrect way. So most punters fall into the trap of analyzing a chunk of data that will likely make a loss and then begin to backfit the system by adding rules until they see a profit. And the best way to explain this is via an example. So if we take a simple system, back the second favorite on the turf in the last 5 years, then if you run the numbers, we'll just show here, the strike rate is about 19%. But then if you modify the system by suggesting that only back horses that are odds range of 2-1 to 3-1, only in claimers and sellers, classified apprentice in Group 1 and Group 2 races, then you can see that all of a sudden what we have is what looks like a winning system, in that now the strike rate is sort of 30% and the figures look good, Betfair and starting prices. But this is a classic example of a backfitted system, and the reason is there's just no logic to the filters. It's like we've moved the goalpost to sort of fit the circumstances. So the example we've given here is, why would we actually back a horse at the range of 2-1 to 3-1? Why not 6-4? Why not 7-2? Why wouldn't we actually look to back the second favorite in a seller Group 3 race or a listed race? So there's an example where we have to really justify with some logic before we add some sort of filter. If we can't have some logic or robust sort of structure behind our thinking, then we shouldn't add it, or we shouldn't consider that as part of our system. So some suggestions on how we create a robust system are as follows. Just go through the logic of your initial system idea before applying any filters. The less filters you use in your system, the more likely it is to succeed. And then only add a filter if there is some logic behind it. So an example could be that everybody's aware of the draw bias at Beverley Racecourse, and the fact that previously it was horses drawn high, now it's horses drawn low, have an advantage. Everybody's aware of that. And that advantage is afforded to horses that like to run prominently. So let's assume for the moment that nobody was aware of the sort of Beverley draw system, but you were aware of it, but you also knew that the system itself performed better with horses that like to run prominently. then a logical filter would be to say, if the horse is a held up horse, it likes to run behind, then I'll kind of filter out those type of horses. Why? Because they're unable to take advantage of that draw bias. So that's a really good example of how you would use a filter and the logic behind it. The less specific you are with filters, the better. In the previous slide, we talked about, between certain price ranges. So, if you say, oh, I'm only going to back horses that have done 56 days, well, why not 55? Why not 54? Why not 57? Because if you are specific about the filters that you use, what you'll find is that you're actually narrowed down to a unique set of circumstance, and there you fall into the trap of not only backfitting but also limiting your sample size, and we'll go on to talk about that in a moment. And then with your system, you do need to enumerate it. You do need to find out what its performance is over time. And this is where the Proform tools, and specifically the system builder, can help us to quantify our system. So for those of you who don't have Proform, when you actually run the system builder, you get profit and loss figures from the system, but there are also some other variables that we can use to help us quantify how good a system is or is not. The first one is the profit and loss figure to Betfair. Yeah, Betfair starting prices, and then we have the return on investment again to Betfair starting prices, and those are indicated in the image on the screen. The other column we can utilize is this column called expected winners, and let me just spend a moment explaining it. What you can do is you can take the sort of information implied in the runners and the winners, and you can actually look at their odds, and by combining it in a certain way, you can come out with a probability of what the expected winners should be. Here, the example, the expected winners based on the probability of the runners should be 7519. The actual number of winners was 7930, which leads us on to another metric that we can use, which is actual over expected. And what it is a ratio between the winners themselves and the expected winners to give us a number. And if you've looked at my previous videos or seen the information we have on the website, anything that's 1 indicates that the actual situation is normal, and what we're looking for is a number above 1, which means it's better than expected, and anything below 1 is worse than expected. The higher, the better. And then the final column or metric that we can use to quantify our system is the chi-score. It's a statistical measure that effectively looks at the numbers and tells you whether that occurrence occurred by chance. There is a video in our Learn More area which talks about it specifically, so I won't talk about it in too much detail here. But it's that sort of final arbiter, that final check to make sure that if the figure and here the figure needs to be the higher the better. But we also stipulate that really we should be the actual chi-score itself is not meaningful unless the number of expected winners is above 5. This number needs to be greater than 5. If it is, then what we have is a sample size. So we go back to what I said previously, that you add lots and lots of filters. The more filters you add, the more backfitting you're doing, but also you're kind of limiting your sample size. And what you'll find yourself that the chi-score itself may indicate that actually it's not a robust system. So let's look at some examples of systems. And the first one we'll look at is on the website. Let me just pull that up slightly. Okay, here we go. Good. Right. So on the website, we have our daily stats area. You would have seen us put out information indicating the various stats for the day's races, and they're categorized into sort of horses, courses, trainers, jockeys, or whatever. And what I have now is the website logged in as a free user. So you're exposed to a limited set of information. but there is enough information there that allows you to actually create your own systems. So what we have here is the trainer-jockey combination on the flat. We have the actual relevant information about the statistic itself, but then we also have the important columns, the ones which I mentioned earlier on, the expected column and the chi-score on this actual over expected as well. So one example is, if you're a free user, is that you could go along to our website every single day and find out those stats for those categories, which are the expected winners are greater than 5 and the chi-score is greater than 3. And that can formulate or help you formulate the basis of a system that you can measure over time. And we've got the basic statistics here, but it's obviously better to clarify it for yourself. So that's one potential source of a system. The other area is in our race guides as well. So I have a race guide for 3 o'clock today at Leopardstown. And in the positive and negative section, we have our positive and negative statistics, but also note that the expected columns are there, the AE column is there, and the chi-score is there as well. Now, the reason why we've highlighted the columns in red indicates that the expected winners is below 5. In other words, there's just not enough sample behind that statistic for us to draw any conclusion. But if you're looking at our free race guides or you're looking at our race guides itself, here's another source that we can utilize for the basis of our system. For those of you who are Platinum subscribers, the whole thing is made slightly easier. In that, if we go again to our daily stats area, what we can do is select the little search icon here, and what we'll get is a set of filters that we can utilize. So we'll just wait for the system to finish doing what it's doing, and notice what we have now is a whole bunch of filters. So what we could do is, using the criteria that we stipulated, stick in the expected winners greater than 5, a chi-score of greater than 3. We'll crunch the numbers within the web browser, and as you can see now, what we have is a whole bunch of statistics that can formulate the basis of any system that we choose. And it's all done for you. So you don't have to go through and look at them. You can actually set up your own search criteria. So again, that's another form of source for a system. But what we'll do now is to go on and show you how you can create some of these stats and also create systems within the system builder. An example I'll take is one from today. And what we'll look at is, I'll just pull it up, the first time stats, and we'll look at this one here. So it's a trainer first run in a handicap hurdle. That could be the formulation of our system. We'll look at WP Mullins. So we just go to the software. We'll now go into the system builder, and for those of you who haven't seen it before, the actual system build itself has a number of tabs where we enter information under each tab. Each tab is logically grouped. So for instance, all the horse information is under the horse tab, or the classification information is in the classification tab, or the race or date information is under the date tab. So if we just look to replicate the first time in a handicap hurdle, we'll enter the trainer's name under the horse tab here. The race itself is a handicap hurdle, and then what we'll do is utilize the horse 2 tab where we have number of runs. There is a great video that Simon's created which explains this, but effectively what you can do is sort of categorize or limit, no, sorry, that's the wrong word, set up a criteria to say, if I run this particular system, then I want only limit to ones that effectively are to the number of runs. And you can chop and choose, pick and mix whatever sort of formulation you want using the grids here. So for example, I've given that we want to look at Willie Mullins' record first time in a handicap hurdle, then we go along to here, handicaps, hurdle, and then we just put the number 0 in there. Now with the system set up, if we just run the system, what we can see is Willie Mullins' record when he has horses first time in a handicap hurdle, and you can see that the strike rates and the relevant information I pointed out earlier is there, which can confirm that. Yep, so all the information is correct. And then the beauty of the system builder is that if that was the basis of our system, then we can actually save it by just save system here, and then pull it up as we need to look at the figures. And more importantly, we get the system qualifiers here. So that's the sort of benefit behind the system builder. It helps us to create the system, helps us qualify it, but also it can tell us when the horse is running again, which is really good. A number of things I need to point out here. One of the columns that I haven't mentioned earlier on is the LWR and the LLR. That's the longest winning run and the longest losing run. And it's important to note those, because if we are going to follow the system, whether we like it or not, we are going to go through a potentially losing run. And what the system builder has told us is that for this specific system, the longest winning run is 2 and the longest losing run is 24. And this is probably where systems get sort of a bad name, in that you're going to have to potentially go through a long losing run, and this is where people may fall out of love with the system, stop, and then all of a sudden the system comes back and suddenly produces winners. So it's important to know these figures here, because if you're going to set up some sort of betting bank, then it needs to be in a situation where it can survive 24 losing runs in a row. Okay. The thing we should also consider as well is to look at the system over time. And what we can do, and the advice is when you are looking at systems, is to say, well, did it work last year? Did it work previously? Or is it something that's just come out of the blue? And the way we can do that is to present the information by year. So we've set up System Builder to look at Willie Mullins' record when he runs his horses first time in a handicap hurdle. And you can see that so we'd start from sort of 2009, his record over a number of years. And so the profitable figure we can see comes from 3 winning years. And this is where, if we use a system builder, we do need to make sure that the system is profitable over a number of years. It may be that he hasn't had many runners, but you can see that 2015 he had 3 winners, but and that was a 10% strike rate out of 28 runners. But let's for the moment have a look at not Willie Mullins, but let's look at a number of different trainers, and that's really simple. All we can do is just remove his name and run the system again. And so what we're looking at now is all trainers and their record with their horses first time in a handicap hurdle. And I made that mistake again. We need to present by trainer. Let's run that again. And as you can see, we have everybody's record here. A lot of information to absorb, but it's relatively simple by just using the filter tab here. We turn on the filter and then again use our criteria of saying filter the results by anything that's greater than or equal to 5 expected winners and a chi-score of 3. Let's run that again. And now we're getting down to what I would say is a meaningful list of that we can interrogate, i.e. the list of trainers that meet our criteria of being more than generating a sample size greater than 5 expected winners and a relevant chi-score as well, and we can investigate further. So let's take Anthony Honeyball. I've got his name here. so I don't have to embarrass myself by typing his name incorrectly. We'll take the filter off, and then we'll just set the system builder up just to look at Anthony Hannibal. And there, you can see his figures that for his horse's first time in a handicap hurdle, he's got a 26% strike rate. He's profitable to Betfair, SP, and to starting prices as well. Greater than 5 expected winners, and his Chi score is greater than the number is specified, which is 3. So there, that could formulate the basis of a system. Back, for example, Anthony Hannibal, first time in the handicap hurdle. But again, we know we need to do some final checks, and we'll have a look at his record by year. So you can see that from 2010, he's had a profitable years, but it could be that they had some big price winners. And when I was looking at this today, you can go into each of the results for each line by just double clicking on the line. You can see that for last year, the winners that he had were 11-1 and 5-2, and then a number of placed efforts, and then 3 horses didn't finish. So what it really highlights is that when we actually look at a system itself, we do need to integrate it. But once we've got the information, it can help us to sort of put forward a system that we can save, and then shorten the amount of work when it comes down to determine whether we're going to have a bet or not. So with that, what I'll sort of close is just give you some sort of 10 commandments that I won't take credit for. It came from a book that Nick Morden wrote, which is called Winning Without Thinking. And it's a guide to horse racing systems, and he's given sort of 10 commandments that if you break these, then you're in danger of creating a system that's not robust. So in summary, the first one is that the goal of the system is not to pick winners, but to identify a type of horse that the betting public consistently underestimates. It's the betting public that sort of collectively create the odds. And if you can find a scenario where they've underestimated a situation, then you have an edge, and then you can utilize that edge and turn it into profit. The best systems are based on facts which defy most punters' expectations. I've already mentioned about the whole bias between female jockey and male jockeys, and there's the whole racing world is littered with a number of different situations where the expectation of the crowd is not true because they haven't sort of enumerated their idea and have the facts behind it, and effectively they're making an incorrect assumption, which then provides us an opportunity to take advantage of it. Be suspicious of any system based on information that we can glean from your daily newspaper. My mantra is you never should underestimate the sort of betting public. There's some very clever people out there, but also there's some people that will just try stuff and suddenly they'll come up with the same system that you have as well. So if you're using information that's public, i.e. the Racing Post, which is plastered on every single bookmaker up and down the land, then the chances are somebody else is going to use the same information to come up with the same system as you, and then before you know it, that system won't produce profits. But if you are going to base a system on readily accessible information, it must use the information in an unexpected way, something different. And this is where Proform can help, in that you can actually crunch the numbers and twist it a little bit and do what I did today, take a piece of public information, twist the information using Proform, and actually find that I can come up with a really, really simple system by just using that data in an unexpected way. If you can't describe a system in a short sentence, the idea behind it is certainly not strong enough to produce long-term profits. And that goes back to what I was saying about, backfitting, that it should be really, really simple. If it's more than a sentence, then that should really sound alarm bells to say, hang on a minute, am I backfitting the system to suit the circumstance? The opposite is true. Don't bend the rules to fit the results. Do not expect the system to continue to be profitable when the circumstances that gave rise to it changes. And the Chester draw bias is a really good example that for a while, quite a long while, store one, store two, under certain circumstances, produced profits, but something's changed. The numbers has told us that that's the case. So with that, we should sort of recognize that change, maybe do some research to find out why it's changed, and then we could possibly take the other side of, if the whole world still believes in something, then we can take the opposite view and lay it. But again, don't expect the system to continue to be profitable. Avoid systems which success is based off of an inadequate sample of results, and this is where you'll need statistics and tools like Proform, or even your own records to sort of validate the information. And then always remember that the betting market will eventually adjust to take account of any successful method for identifying winners. It could be you putting it on a forum, it could be something like modeling coming up in the paper, it could be anything, but eventually the market adjusts, it catches on, and that's where you need to be nimble enough to be able to identify when they have, and possibly move on to a different system or look to ditch it completely. And don't follow any system blindly. So for example, if your system comes up with a horse that clearly acts on heavy ground and the conditions of today are good to firm, then your system may say one thing, but the reality is something else. So it's a really good example of not following the system blindly. So that concludes the webinar for this evening. Hopefully that's given you an insight into systems, how they can help you and save time as well for those of you who are relatively busy and don't have time to sort of look through the form book. Also discussed how you can utilize the Proform resources to base systems on the information that we provide, and also I've given you hopefully some indications where you can draw upon some system ideas from the general world outside. This presentation and webinar will be recorded, or is being recorded, and so what I'll do is edit it and then put it in the Learn More area. I always say this all the time, there's some great information on the website and some great videos as well. So I suggest that for those of you that are not subscribed to Proform and really not sort of aware of who we are and what we do and what benefit we can provide, look at the videos. They're free for access. Get a feel for the information, and if you find that it piques your interest towards subscribing, then please do so. And then if you wish to contact us, then there are the relevant details on the slide there. So that concludes the webinar for this evening. Hopefully you found it useful. I think we'll plan another webinar in a couple of weeks, because we're now starting to think about Cheltenham. So maybe we'll come up with some ideas about how we look at Cheltenham, or some other of the major races in the forthcoming weeks. So thanks everybody for listening. Take care and have a nice evening. Bye-bye.